Hi everyone, what's good? Hope you're doing well. So I'm jumping on here today to talk about ivermectin and COVID. Great. I think Joe Rogan has reportedly said he has tested positive for COVID, and he is taking several things for that. One of which is ivermectin, even though there is no scientific evidence to suggest it shows any benefit whatsoever. So there's been controversy around this anti-parasitic for a while. It's about 50 years old. I think it was primarily used to treat heartworm in horses back in the day. But there's no real scientific data which really suggests that it is of benefit to someone that has COVID. But I really wanted to kind of break that down and also look at a paper that some people cite to support their argument that ivermectin might be beneficial, and kind of pick it apart and tell you why it's not a study of high caliber. But I'm not going to spend like 15, 20 minutes talking about this. I want to talk about it quite briefly and quite swiftly. So I thought I would just do that. So the best way I'm going to do this is kind of share my screen and go through some different bits and bobs. So first of which, this is what we're seeing kind of shared around, right? This is this news source that was brought around. So Joe Rogan reported that he has COVID. This was originally on his Instagram page, I think, and now obviously the news sources have taken that apart. I'm based in the US, so a lot of these original ones or first news sources are American outlets. But the basic premise of ivermectin, all you have to do is Google it, right? It is an anti-parasitic. It's been used for decades to treat heartworm in horses, but it can be utilized for other anti-parasitic infections. However, there's been like this social media uproar regarding how it could potentially be beneficial in comparison to something like a vaccine or something, and it's very much a drug that has been like pushed via the anti-vax movement for sure. So the FDA have released a massive article saying like why ivermectin doesn't work. It's freely available. Like I said, I'm showing you all of this stuff here. So FDA.gov consumer stuff. But obviously I can provide you with that link if you need it, or you can just, you can also Google the headline here, why you should not use ivermectin to treat or prevent COVID-19. Basic premise is that it doesn't work. Fact. And I just kind of want to go through these different things. And there are other news sources that have talked about this for a long time. Forbes have recently uploaded something a couple of days ago. This was on the 29th of August. So funnily enough, just before Joe Rogan has announced that he is using it for his disease, even though it's not going to help with his symptoms. He'll naturally get better over time. And then some people will go, oh, he's getting better because of ivermectin, and actually he's just getting better because that's what happens after you get an infection. So the World Health Organization talk about an alternative. I try to really push the idea of there is drugs available that can be given to people that are critically ill with COVID. One of these is called dexamethasone, which is a glucocorticoid anti-inflammatory. So, for example, when the inflammatory response in your own immune system is so severe, this can really contribute to severe complications. So if you take dexamethasone, if you're one of these severe patients, you might reduce your risk of dying due to COVID. So the idea that I've seen from multiple people that have contacted me regarding ivermectin is that you can't patent the drug, which is true. Ivermectin has been around for 50 years. Patents usually last 10 to 15. I think the last time, I actually don't know the last time it was patented, but I do know the last time dexamethasone was patented. But my main kind of hole or question to break apart the argument of why we should use ivermectin and not vaccines or whatever is that so the basic premise is that anti-vaxxers are saying we can, instead of paying money to big pharma, you can use ivermectin and that'll protect you, and you can buy it for like $1 or something really cheap. However, the World Health Organization, the FDA, Public Health England have also emphasized why not use dexamethasone, which has been approved for critically ill patients. The last time dexamethasone was patented was in the 80s, right? So again, that will be a cheap drug. further emphasizing that there are drugs available that aren't patented for this disease. But we also have vaccines, which of course are patented because they're produced in the last year and developed in the last 18 months to, well, what, almost 2 years now. So there are alternatives, but well, supplements. I wouldn't suggest getting dexamethasone and not a vaccine. Dexamethasone is basically the ultimate example of, if you have really severe illness and you're at considerable risk of dying, doctors will give a patient dexamethasone. That's the premise of this. But that does actually show benefit, and ivermectin actually doesn't. So, and there's data on this, right? So some of that was from the Recovery Collaborative Group. They did a study in hospitalized patients. It was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. I think, when was this released? This was released in February of this year, 2021, just talking about a range of different patients that they looked at, their death rates, and then also, or fatality rates, and also reporting that dexamethasone can decrease fatalities of people that have severe COVID in the clinic. So in terms of ivermectin, the best way you can kind of look at this in terms of like a real world scenario whereby we know it doesn't work is India. India had originally produced it on one of their protocols based on some real lackluster, controversial studies in South America, which really weren't of any academic or scientific report or credit. So and this has been a real controversy in the country, to the point that it was actually stripped from its treatment protocol because of that, because some people have quoted it as they're using ivermectin is almost as bad, or advising for the use of ivermectin is almost as bad as India's response to the pandemic overall. So it's just really emphasizing that these sources are coming from all sorts of locations, not just science, but this is from Asia Financial, right? This is from financial websites, not scientific website, even though scientific papers and scientific articles all over the internet refute ivermectin and its use for COVID. So there's one thing I want to look at that I've been kind of pushed to read multiple times now, actually. And a lot of people that support ivermectin is because of this study. So titled, it basically is a meta-analysis and a systematic review. What they do here is they scour properly, scour the evidence to look for supporting arguments that for a particular topic might be beneficial for disease. So I did my own review, which looking at potential therapeutics for Alzheimer's disease. This is an example of that, but looking at ivermectin. I'm not going to go into the massive detail about this. There are huge flaws with this paper, one of which is really easy to see. And this is based on a couple of things. So when they talk about data searches, one of the things they initially report is that they search bibliographic databases up to the 25th of April, 2021 to extract data to prove that ivermectin is beneficial in COVID. Okay, so the immediate thing I will report, it says up to April 25th, 2021. A incredible paper published in JAMA Neurology, which is one of the highest impacted journals in the world, in March of 2021, in a randomized clinical trial, which is one of the considered gold standards, is that ivermectin does not work. Okay, it's 476 patients. It's not the biggest, but it's much bigger than some of the sources that this other review cites. It is strong argument to support multiple others that have already come out to refute the claim of this fact. Well, this fact from this review, right? So a couple of other aspects to this review that I'm just going to quickly point out. So here they talk about different records that they've identified. So these will be papers that they were going to include for the study, but then didn't. So what they identified here is that they identified various studies here. So what they identified here was that there was 594 records screened. So what that probably means is that there was about 594 papers or relative documents of information that they could have utilized for this review. However, they then excluded 512. So, and what they actually, in terms of their final summary, they only actually used 24 studies out of this massive list. While that might be okay, The problem is that they don't actually mention what their exclusion criteria is. So this is published in a relatively shit journal, to be honest. The impact factor is very low. I've published papers in higher journals, and that was from my PhD work, to put it in perspective, right? So this is why it's in such a bad journal, because the meta-analysis is not sufficient. They don't use industry standard methods of how to do it, and they haven't included their exclusion criteria, which is a real red flag for a researcher that's not involved in this research group like myself. Like, if I see that they've done a meta-analysis and not told us their exclusion criteria, I'm immediately going to go, nope, not going to look at it. If I was doing that for Alzheimer's disease, there is no way I would even consider that for anything that I was potentially writing, or for it to potentially sway what research avenue I was going to go down, because I wouldn't trust the data that it provides. So the British Medical Journal have written this fantastic piece talking about this misleading evidence in these systematic reviews on their website. So you can go EBM opinion and debate and write in misleading clinical evidence and systematic reviews on ivermectin for COVID-19, which is written by these fantastic scientists. And they go into massive detail about this controversy, talking about all sorts of reviews that have been published and potential primary research projects that were put forward as potentially being beneficial by these authors, even though clearly ivermectin doesn't work. And it provides all of the references, both the studies that support ivermectin, which are controversial, and then the waves of evidence which shows that it doesn't work in this regard. And in terms of ivermectin, Merck have their own form of it, right? And even Merck, a big pharmaceutical company, evil, whatever, but they've come out and said ivermectin doesn't work in a press release. They said in February 4th, 2021, this was ages ago, you know, and they were like, it doesn't work. Stop trying to use it. So I just really want to emphasize that fact, really, right? So there's a lot of just crap flying around on social media and the internet, and it's so easy to see something and go, oh yeah, that's true. But if you can't critically evaluate what it shows, you don't know whether the data is any good or not. So if you have any questions about this, please feel free to direct message me and we can set up like a rapport. I'm happy to Zoom people about this sort of stuff. I feel like sometimes feelings are lost over the art of texting or, you know, social media chat, and people can get offended quite easily. I think it's really important to talk about this misinformation, right? It's not true. The argument being is that big pharma is bad. You know, it's not. How many people are paying for your vaccines? I didn't pay for my vaccine. I don't know anyone who paid for their vaccine. The governments did, right? Sure, the pharmaceutical companies make money. That's capitalism. Same way that Starbucks make money when you spend £5 on a crappy coffee, you know, or you spend money on Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut pizzas cost about £3 to make. So if you're complaining about capitalism as regards to pharmaceutical companies, then you need to complain about it in other respects. So for me, it's a load of crap. It's not surprising. The scientific community at large know that ivermectin doesn't work. There's waves of evidence to support it. There are some links here that you can hopefully kind of go back in the web browser and see. If you want the specific links and you can't find them, please let me know and I'll send them to you. Happy to do this. I really enjoy the science communication aspect of what I do. About a bit about me, if you aren't already aware, I am a postdoctoral research scientist specializing in neuroscience, pharmacology, and neuroinflammation. So I'm aware of what the immune system does in infection and disease. I'm not coming from this from a background that's not familiar with the immune system, which is funnily enough, that review I showed you that's supposed to show the benefits of ivermectin was actually written by, I think, gastroenterologists, so not immunologists. So that's things you wouldn't think about looking at. Just because you see a paper about a topic doesn't mean that the authors are specialized and specialists in that area. And that's a really crucial thing to have a look at. And also, when you look at research papers, a lot of people think the first author is the most important, but it's actually the last author. The last author is usually the head of the lab. So they'll be the most senior person in that lab. The first author is usually a grad student or a postdoc, because having first author papers when you're young in your career are really beneficial to try and get an academic position later on. But when you're older and you have those senior academic positions, it's that senior authorship that is really crucial to progression and becoming, like, super professor or whatever. So hope this was helpful. Sorry to, hopefully I'm not pissing on anyone's parade. I'm just being honest. Vaccines work, simple as. I think the people that aren't going to take vaccines now, there's no real swaying them from my perspective. If you feel like you could be swayed and you want to talk about that, I feel like we could talk about that in a one-on-one scenario. And then, of course, it's everyone's choice. But at the same time, having a vaccine and wearing a mask is not just for your benefit, but it's also primarily to also, especially if you're young, but primarily to benefit those who are immunocompromised or elderly and have other pre-existing conditions, and they are particularly vulnerable for severe disease. So remember that, try and look after each other, look after your loved ones, as well as, of course, look after yourself. So have a great week. I hope you're all keeping well. I hope you're happy, regardless of all the fucking shit show that's going on in the world right now. But otherwise, stay safe, and hopefully I will speak to you soon.